Everybody will get a copy later, but this time. Sorry to ask you to raise your hand, but please raise it. No, only for the time being, only business channels and business papers, please. For the time being. Yeah, more copies again. Yeah. Wait, give that to me, that's it. One sheet, get that back, one small sheet. That's a different print, get it back. Yeah. Everyone? What? Selective. It's not selective. More copies are coming. I just giving it. I started by saying that. Not selective. Everybody will get it. More copies are coming. Distribute this. Can you get a studio? Can we get a studio? No, you should have research.
I think we can start.
Is he ringing us too?
Yeah, he's getting all this papers here.
एमबीएस अब देखे दोनों आ रहे हैं एमबीएस मतलब एमबीएस अब दोनों मिल रहे हैं अभी आ जाएगा दोनों आ जाएगा ठीक है हाँ बड़ा ठीक है दोनों मिल रहे हैं अभी वो बोलेगा बोलना तो शुरू करेगा देखो अब बोलना शुरू करो
Good afternoon. Can you please settle down, please? Please settle down. Good afternoon to all of you. Okay, you're most welcome to shut the door. Yeah. If they can come inside.
साउंड बढ़ाने बोलो यार साउंड बढ़ाओ
अरे नहीं भैया नहीं ठीक है यार सफोकेटिंग है यार यहाँ पे
साउंड बढ़ाओ ना
You can start. Is it better now? Good. Okay. Good afternoon. This was planned as a end of the year conference to report on the economy. But then we had to move the venue to the AICC because of the code of conduct. I'm happy to be able to report the performance at the end of the year from the AICC's platform. Obviously, this media conference cannot be confined only to matters relating to the economy. There will be other questions, and I'll be quite happy to answer any other question to the best of my ability. But I wish to begin by talking about the economy. The year will end more or less as we planned. We will end the year with a fiscal deficit of 4.6% as planned. Our reserves today have crossed $300 billion. We expect to add about $25 billion to the reserves by the end of today for the whole year. And the current account deficit, which is originally estimated at under 60 billion and then brought down progressively as we moved forward, the current account deficit is now likely to be much smaller, perhaps about $35 billion. So what we set out to do after my return to the Finance Ministry in August 2012, and what we set out to do at the beginning of this year, has been substantially accomplished. The economy is more stable. No one talks about a downgrade anymore. The fundamentals have strengthened. And if anyone has any doubt, I can invite him to a number of articles. I can quote one. The editorial in the Economic Times of the 28th of March 2014. I'm not doing an advertisement for that paper, but that's the last editorial. I've handed over a sheet of paper, and those of you who have it will kindly follow it, and others, you will get a copy. What has happened over the last 10 years is, we must look at the period up to 2007-8 and the period thereafter. If political leaders, analysts, do not recognize that what happened on September 15, 2008 was a watershed, I'm afraid they don't understand what's happening in the world. So one has to look at the performance of the UPA up to 2007-8, and then what kind of challenges the country faced and the government faced, and how we tackled those challenges post September 2008. I've given in this sheet of paper data for some key years. 1997-98, when the NDA government completed 1 year and there was a re-election. Then 1998-99. Then 2002-2003, when NDA's first finance minister was, to put it mildly, moved out of North Block. Then 2003-04, when the NDA term came to an end and the UPA's term began. 2007-08, the watershed year, the year after which the crisis hit the world. Then 2008-09, the last year of UPA 1, when we were in the middle of a full-blown crisis. And then 2013-14, the year that comes to an end today. Those of you who have the sheet in front of you will notice that on every parameter, 2007-08 was the most outstanding year in India's history in terms of economic performance. That was the year when our reserves had crossed $300 billion, $309 billion. And today I'm happy to report it has crossed $300 billion once again. That was the year when the fiscal deficit was lowest at 2.5. The revenue deficit was lowest at 1.1. External debt to GDP was lowest at 18%. The external debt service ratio that year and the following year were among the lowest, 4.8 and 4.4 respectively. Savings to GDP ratio was the highest, 36.8. Investment to GDP ratio was the highest, 38.1. And GDP growth was the highest at 9.3%. On every parameter, 2007-08 was an outstanding year. And we could have continued that splendid run, but for the crisis that hit the world in September 2008. So post September 2008, the picture is mixed. And I don't want to go into the details. I've said this in the budget speech. I've explained what happened, the unconventional monetary policy that was adopted by all countries of the world, including India. Everybody has the benefit of hindsight, but when? After the event. Hindsight is not something we are blessed with when events are happening. Every country adopted unconventional monetary policy, monetary expansion, increased public expenditure. India did the same thing, and that was the right medicine at that time. As a result of which, growth was anchored at a high level. But it exacted a price. I've explained this before, therefore I don't want to go into a long explanation. The price it exacted was a high fiscal deficit, an unacceptably high current account deficit, because imports were high, and inflation. In the last 18 months, what we have tried to do is to pull back on monetary expansion, which several other countries are trying to do. The Americans call it taper. We have pulled back on monetary expansion. We have contained expenditure. We have tried to stabilize growth, and we have succeeded, not in full measure, but in substantial measure. The biggest success we have attained is in containing the fiscal deficit. If you ask me what is the one number which analysts all over the world are looking at, it is the fiscal deficit number. That's the first sign of whether the economy is stable or not. We have contracted the fiscal deficit substantially. We have contained it exactly according to the plan I outlined after I accepted the Vijay Kelko report. In fact, we have done better than the plan. The second significant success is in sharply containing the current account deficit. Remember, last year it was $88 billion, and no one gave us half a chance of being able to contain it or to finance it. This year, the year that ends today, we have not only contracted the current account deficit substantially, we have added to reserves. I think we will add about $25 billion to reserves, and our reserves have crossed $300 billion this afternoon. We've also contained inflation. I'm not saying we have tamed inflation, but we have moderated inflation. WPI inflation has come down. So has CPI inflation, but there is some distance to go. And if there are questions, I will be happy to answer why some of the steps that we took in order to help sections of people who deserved help, like farm labor, like producers of cereals like wheat, paddy, and commercial crops like sugarcane. Why those steps would necessarily have an inflationary impact, but balancing the inflationary impact and the beneficial impact of those steps on the poor, consciously some steps were taken to increase the minimum support price, to increase the wages under Manrega, to give an impetus to rural wages. But we can go into that later if any of you wish to ask questions. So let me tell you, and through you, the people of India, the economy today is far more stable and far stronger than what it was 20 months ago. And what we feared may happen has not happened. The economy is stable, and going forward, I can only see spirited growth in the economy. provided, and this is the big proviso, provided the next government adheres to the 10-point agenda that I outlined in my interim budget speech. That is not a partisan agenda. That is not a party's agenda. That can be the only agenda of a nation that wants to go forward. That is the only agenda of anyone who's concerned about keeping India's economy, India's flag high in a turbulent world. And if there are any questions on the 10-point agenda, I'll be quite happy to answer those questions. If we adhere to the 10-point agenda, I have no doubt in my mind that we will quickly get back to the high growth path. I will keep a firm hand on the wheel until the last day, and I sincerely hope that I can hand over the wheel to another firm hand. Those are my opening remarks. Now, the floor is open for questions.
I think yes.
Yashwant Sinha has hit out at you, and he especially said, he's given 18 questions for you to answer. He's saying under your watch, the economy has been in a shambles. That's my first question. I have a...
No. One question.
Well, the last 10 minutes I've tried to explain why the economy is stronger and more stable. I've gone through most of those questions. Many of them are quite puerile questions, which is why I suppose no financial paper or major paper even carried the 18 questions. I take about 6-7 papers a day, and I have not found the 18 questions in any of the papers. So I'm happy that my judgment of the question is shared by many editors. Many of them are quite puerile. Besides, the 2 years which recorded the lowest growth since the turn of the century was 2000, 2001, when GDP grew by 4.3%, and 2002, 2003, when the GDP grew by 4%. And you know what happened to the finance minister who presided over those 2 years. You know what happened to that finance minister. Mr. Yashwant Sinha today is a distant memory for the people of India, and I hope he remains where he is, a distant memory.
Yeah.
Sir, now that the current account deficit has come down to $35 billion, are you considering lifting gold in the
Well, I'm surprised that so many of you are still passionately attached to gold. Some relaxations were made a few days ago when more banks were allowed to import gold. We could consider some more relaxations in consultation with the RBI. Let the RBI's monetary policy be announced tomorrow, and then we will consider whether some relaxations can be done.
Mr. Finance Minister, specifically on the issue.
Yeah.
He is the moderator.
Yeah, please.
Mr. Finance Minister, specifically on the issue of job creation, sir, would you say that that is one area where perhaps the Congress-led UPA government could have done better?
All right. Just hold on to this for a minute.
Please identify yourself, because many of them are from the economic newspapers. We are not familiar with them, so please identify yourself whenever the questions are.
Okay. Now this is a bit technical, but you will have to bear with me. there are two metrics. One is the status of the respondent who's asked the question. He's asked usually two questions: current daily status and usual principal and subsidiary status, to ask whether he is employed. That is where you get it in the numerator. Then there's a denominator which is equally important, which is how many people are offering themselves for jobs in the job market. Now if you look at usual principal and subsidiary status, in 1999-2000, 396 million people said what their employment status was, that they were employed. They said they were employed. In 2004-05, 457 million people said they were employed. That's the first year of the UPA. In 2009-10, 459 million people said they were employed. And in 2011-12, 472 million people said they were employed. So the number of people who say they're employed is actually rising, not declining. That is point one. Even if you look at current daily status, the numbers for the 4 years are 338 million in 99-2000, 382 million in 2004-05, 400 million in 2009-10, and 415 million in 2011-12. So numbers are rising. But what is happening is the denominator is not changing or rising at the same rate. Especially if you break it down by gender, women who are offering themselves for jobs in the job market and would have to be counted in the denominator are not offering themselves in such large numbers. Some people have gone into this phenomenon. One of the reasons, this is not the only reason, one of the reasons is enrollment in schools has increased substantially. Gross enrollment ratio in the colleges has increased substantially, and not enough people, as compared to previous years in terms of growth, are offering themselves for jobs. Which is why the absolute number of jobs created from point to point, which is what the NDA is harping upon, has declined. But equally, what the UPA will harp upon is unemployment is declining. So both are true statements. The absolute number of jobs created by the CDS, UP, SS is not as large as it was in the NDA period, but the unemployment rate is lower than in the NDA period. For example, if you look at the unemployment rate, it was 8.2% when the UPA took office. It came down to 6.6% in 2009-10. It came to 5.6% in 2011-12, for which numbers are available. So I think this is in fact a rather complex issue where numbers can be interpreted or even misinterpreted. But what I would say is this: yes, in absolute numbers, if you go by UPSS and CDS, the number of people who claim to be employed and therefore jobs is higher in the NDA period. But there are other things happening in society. People are in school, people are in college, people are in self-employment or whatever, and therefore the number of people coming to the job market, especially women, is lower. The unemployment rate has declined substantially. It has in fact declined from 8.2% to 5.6% if you go by the CDS. So I think there is merit in both arguments.
Yeah. One, we'll come back. Yeah.
लक्ष्मण है सीएमडीसी आवाज से आपने कहा गवर्नमेंट ने कई सारे स्टेप्स लिए और इकोनॉमी अब वरिष्ठ बन है, लेकिन मैं यहाँ पे यशवंत सिन्हा के क्वेश्चन को कोट करूंगा कि जब आपने कहा 19 मार्च को कि मैं अब इलेक्शन कॉन्टेस्ट नहीं करने जा रहा हूँ, उस दिन सेंसेक्स 125 पॉइंट ऊपर चढ़ा। यशवंत सिन्हा का कहना है कि सेंसेक्स को सेलिब्रेट किया।
I think the celebration began when Mr. Yashwant Sinha declined to contest elections. And the celebrations are continuing. The celebrations are continuing now that the BJP is doing a number of things like expelling Yashwant Sinha. The celebrations are continuing now. Even today the market celebrated. What is the market celebrating today? These are puerile questions.
Sir, I have a question.
No. Let the moderator ask you and I will answer.
Yeah.
I'm trying, moderator.
Speak loudly.
Mr. Yashwant Sinha also accused you that you have brought down fiscal deficit artificially. The UPA government messed up the investment climate. And number 3, that in case India government comes to power, they will revisit the gas pricing policy.
No, what is your question? You are asking 3 questions in one to one. What is your question?
It is alleged that you have brought down fiscal deficit artificially. Would you like to respond to that? Number 2, that the...
All right. There are only 2 ways in which fiscal deficit can be contained. One is by increasing revenues more than your original estimate, or reducing expenditure from your original estimate. There is no third way. Nobody, not even the NDA or the BJP, has any magic wand other than the two metrics that I mentioned. When economic growth is slow, revenues don't increase rapidly. In the UPA 1 period, revenues increase by 20% a year. When economic growth is slow, when global trade is slow, when all advanced economies are growing at a much slower rate, revenues won't increase exponentially. So when revenues don't rise, the only way is to contain expenditure. We have, if you look at plan to plan, we have not reduced plan expenditure from one year to the previous year. For example, if you look at 2012-13, plan expenditure actuals was 4,13,625 crore. If you look at 2013-14 revised estimates, plan expenditure is 4,75,532 crore. It is still 62,000 crore more than the previous year. And 62,000 crore on a base of 4,13,000 crore represents an increase of about 14%. So plan expenditure has been increased, but when we cannot afford the original plan expenditure, some plan expenditure has to be cut. I thought this was elementary.
Just a minute.
You have to catch his eye.
Statesman.
Mr. Chidambaram, 2 of your colleagues, Mr. Anand Sharma and Mr. Jairam Ramesh, they have hit out at Election Commission for what they accuse Election Commission of indulging in overreach over Election Commission's decision to ask the government to defer its decision to double the gas prices. Would you share the sentiments of your 2 colleagues, and does the Congress party feel that it is now the case, fit case to revisit the gas price hike issue?
Mr. Minister.
You want to answer that? Okay. Now, in my view, there was no obligation on the part of the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas to refer this issue to the Election Commission in the first place. This was a cabinet decision taken several months ago. The cabinet reviewed the decision about 2.5, 3 months ago, long before the election notification came, and reiterated its earlier decision. Therefore, there was no case to refer it to the Election Commission. I think they did it out of abundant caution. I think there is no case to revisit the cabinet decision. The cabinet decision is a right decision. It has taken into account all pros and cons, including reservations expressed by different ministries. So the cabinet decision is the right decision, and I would defend the cabinet decision. Please remember, for every unit of gas that we do not produce out of our own fields, it does not mean that we can live without gas. We have to import an equivalent 1 unit of gas. And today we are importing 1 unit of gas at a much higher price than the approximately $8 that we had indicated with effect from 1st April 2014.
Mr. Finance Minister, you've been quoted as saying that big business is supporting Mr. Modi and the BJP. Is there an admission then that big business or corporate India has deserted the Congress?
No, I said big business with a capital B, and now I can add capital I, capital G. That kind of big business, which likes crony capitalism, is the most ardent supporter of the BJP. I think business is comfortable with the UPA. I think business is quite comfortable with Dr. Manmohan Singh. Business was quite comfortable with the UPA's finance ministers. But there are sections of business which are extremely comfortable with BJP and Mr. Narendra Modi, because his brand of capitalism is crony capitalism.
Would you qualify that section of business? Yes.
I beg pardon?
Would you qualify that section of business?
Qualify means? I've qualified it big with B-I-G.
I'm coming. We are coming.
No, he has to.
Yeah, please.
Mr. Chidambaram, several of your colleagues this time wanted to change their seats or not fight elections at all. In your case, sir, why did you decide not to fight elections?
Good question. Good question. I have fought 8 elections over the last 30 years. And I made it clear in many interviews, even a year ago, that I have many other things that I want to do in my life. Life has only one innings. There are no 2 innings in this life. There's only one innings. It's like a T20 or a ODI 50. How I play the last 10 overs of my innings, I have to decide. I cannot live your life. You cannot live my life.
So you mean to say that you are retiring from politics now?
I didn't say that. In fact, I categorically denied I'm retiring from politics. I said I'm not contesting this election because I want to do certain other things in my life, in whatever years are left to me.
Rajya Sabha seat, sir.
Yeah.
Will you be accepting a Rajya Sabha seat, sir?
Nobody has offered it to me. Are you offering one?
Sir, when you say that you
I'm just quoting
Yes, yes.
whatever you said just now,
Yeah.
that there is no case to revisit a cabinet decision on gas price hike. Now, the RBI has followed a due process on bank license grant, and they have asked the election commission if they can go ahead with the process. Do you believe that there is a case for grant of election bank licenses, even though the issue has been sent to the election commission? Do you believe the election commission should allow the RBI to go ahead with the bank licenses?
See, Governor Raghuram Rajan made it clear, even on that day, that he referred the matter to the Election Commission only out of abundant caution, and that this process had started almost 2.5 years ago. This is a process in which government has no role at all. Let me repeat that once again for the record. The process of inviting, screening, scrutinizing, and selecting candidates for grant of bank license is a purely RBI-driven process, and the government has no role at all.